You're listening to Novelbound, a podcast dedicated to making you laugh and keeping you company. Each week, we're sharing all of our favorite books and the embarrassing side of life.
I have been recommending this book to Anna for like
so long,
like probably a couple of years now. And then when you messaged me back, I was like, Anna, you have to read this series because like it's our time. Like it's like we finally get to talk to this amazing author. And she was like, okay, sounds good. And like I wish I could I sent you the text messages where I was like, Anna loves this series. It was so great.
Thank you. I mean, it's music to an author's ears to know that people love their books. So yeah, thank you very much.
It was amazing. It's usually like a historical fiction, things like that usually aren't my genre, but I got sucked in immediately. After like 50 pages, I was like, I need to know more.
She was texting me so many questions and like throughout the whole thing. Like today's one, like actually I can't. We figured we would have a spoiler section and we'd have a non-spoiler section. So that way you could just like explain to us what like, or that way we could keep it like, so that way if someone was trying to get to know you and kind of get what's going through, they could feel comfortable. And then we're going to have a whole part where we're just like, okay, girl, we want to spill the tea. Like, just like tell us everything. So we figured we would do that. But honestly, we're just so excited. Like, I can't believe you responded back to me. I was like, I literally texted him. I was like, ouch. Oh my gosh, I love it. But I'd love to like just to get to know you guys a little bit more. Do you like just kind of for people that just don't know you and haven't been able to read your books yet, do you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and just your writing journey?
Sure. Look, I've been writing for quite a while now, and I did a Bachelor of Arts in professional writing when I was way back, and enjoyed every minute of it. It was fantastic. The university experience was fantastic. And I was kind of writing fiction and non-fiction while I was doing that course, and I got my first publication, just a short kind of piece and all that kind of stuff while I was at university.
Wait,
sorry,
which book was it?
Well, it wasn't a book. It was a series. Like talk about kind of on point, on brand. It was an article about trying out afternoon teas.
Oh my gosh, I love that. That's so
just had an episode about this where I was like, wait, you're not supposed to like microwave the water for teas, and I posted about that. I just got burned, so everyone's like, no, you need a kettle. I was like, I boil water. I'm sitting there like,
I was like, not me. Don't add me to that.
That's awesome. I feel like you just definitely got to tell us what do you usually have in your tea?
I like chai tea.
Oh, okay.
And I might get burned for this, but I do like it just with milk. So very milky. Some people have a black chai tea, but it's I'm not actually a tea drinker. I'm more of a hardcore coffee drinker. Yeah. it's the actual, if you looked in my veins, it would be kind of a sludgy coffee. But yeah, look, and I was trained to be a literary short story writer.
Oh, I love that.
That was my university upbringing, and I got a chance to write a science fiction young adult story for an anthology. And one of my kind of things is if an opportunity presents itself, go for it. Mm-hmm. So I wrote this story, never having written a science fiction YA short story before, and it got chosen for the anthology, which is called The Pattern Maker. I think that's probably out of print by now because it was a long time ago. But it was called One Last Zoom at the Buzz Bar, and that was the origin story for my first novel, which is Singing the Dog Star Blues. And out of that opportunity, the publisher of the anthology said, we really like this character, can you write a novel about her? And I said, of course.
Yeah.
And in the end, that publisher didn't take the book,
Oh.
because it was too old for their list. So it's very definitely at the top end of YA. And eventually it got picked up by HarperCollins in Australia, and then it got picked up by Penguin in the States. So that was the beginning of my journey.
That's amazing.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Oh, I'm so happy that you like got to just kind of like take off running when it comes to writing and stuff like that, because it's just like I've just really enjoyed all of your books and stuff like that. And what's really cool is like our followers too. Like when I posted that we were gonna be interviewing you and stuff, like so many people were so excited because they love your books. And so I'm glad that you like got to just like run and go do it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, yes, that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I have to also say that when the publisher, who initially said we love the Joss Aronson character in the Singing the Dogstar Blues book, when they said no, this book is too old for us, there was a sinking to the ground, crying my eyes out, moment of horrific despair.
Yeah.
And that's part of the journey as well. I mean, you have the good times and you have the very, very, very bad times, and that's it's pretty much, I always say when I teach creative writing, because I teach creative writing too, it's to say that there will be those bad times, so feel it, it's part of that journey, but then get up and send that piece out again, because it's no use trying to bottle it up, because it's you pour many years or months or whatever it is, how long it takes to write something, and then it kind of gets, well, no, this is not for us, and that hurts, but the job and the work and the whole career is about, okay, that's not in the right place at the moment. Do I look at it and see if there's anything that I need to change, or do I just send it out again because this is where I want it to be? So yeah.
How do you make that decision that like you like to stay true to your story and not to change something when you feel like that? Like, how do you kind of decipher between that and gain that courage and stuff? I'd love to hear your experiences and stuff.
Yeah. It is very difficult when you're a new writer to have that rock solid faith in the story. I think that it comes with practice, and knowing that you're strong in certain areas in writing. And if someone, if an editor or a publisher says, well, I think that this story needs some work here, and you're aware that that this is not your most strongest area, then yes, definitely look at it, and take on board. It's also about who is giving you the feedback. If it's someone that you respect or has a lot of experience in that area, then yes, it's always worth looking at. It's I mean, unfortunately, there are people out there who also critique to hurt, maybe not consciously, but that can happen as well. So when you do, if you do have critique groups, which I always recommend, because being able to get some kind of feedback is great. But you always have to look at who's giving the critique. So is that person aware of the conventions of your genre? Are they sympathetic to the kind of book that you're trying to do, or are they antagonistic? People are people, and so you've got to just make that judgment of whose input is going to settle and be used. And it's about, I say this, it sounds like I'm kind of like a robot. You are collecting data, but you are collecting data about your work, and it's up to you to say, okay, that one's coming from a place of excellent knowledge about structure, and that person doesn't know science fiction. They're coming from a naive place, which can be useful, because if you have someone who says, I don't get why that that dragon is talking, then that someone who's not sort of comfortable with that genre will have a problem with something. So yeah, it's all data collection, and it's about I suppose it's about putting aside the ego and using it, but that's the hard thing.
Your heart, it's your soul. It's something that sits inside of you and is trying to come out.
Yeah. And that's practice too. It's about, I don't think it's ever perfected. I mean, if you are really creating something that you love, then
Yeah.
you're going to have an emotional attachment to it. And it's the kind of the trick is not to get wiped away by critiques. It's about saying, okay, that hurts. I thought that was working and that hurts. But if after a few days of hardcore chocolate eating, or or a week, however long it takes to actually get that settled in, if it makes sense, if it's kind of going with a little scratch upon your kind of your creative sense and saying, yeah, that might have some sense for me, then it's time to go back and look at it.
Oh my gosh. We are not worthy. We are not worthy.
I
This is
know.
amazing. I want to like have you back on just to like do an episode about this, because I think there are so many people that aspire to write books. There are so many people that are just amazed by like the craft and the art and the majesty that it is. Like, I want to talk about Dark Days, but I'm also like sitting here like, oh my gosh, Allison, thank you. Like, I'm like moved to tears. I'm so excited to talk about this with you.
And, yeah, if you ever want, just let me know, because I love talking about craft, as you can tell.
Like, yes, this is like something that like we are just so honored for. So we can take our time with it, and then like if we do end up switching into Dark Days Pact and stuff, and Dark Days Club, sorry, we've been reading all of the Dark Days books, and so I would love to just have you come back. We'd love to have you come back on and just like, I think we can have our listeners like submit questions for you, and we can send them to you ahead of time, so that way you can kind of like prepare. And then we like, I love hearing the passion in your voice. It's just so beautiful. Anna, why don't you ask, or I'm so sorry, I'm sitting here like, I'm in love with you, Allison.
Oh, you're fine. I just have questions about like the Dark Days Club, because I like just absorbed it all, and it's just in my head, and I'm just in love with it.
Anna,
Go for it.
like, she came prepared. She has like a list of giant, like so many questions.
Oh, yeah, I do.
She texted me like 3 hours ago. She's like, I just read 500 pages today, and I have so much to process. Like, I'm gonna process it with Allison. But oh my gosh, I'm literally so amazed. So let's like, I want to table this because I think that what you're saying is like literally so amazing. I'm literally like, okay, we're bringing her back, and we're gonna have so many questions.
Oh, yeah.
But for Dark Days, something that I just was really impressed with you is that you were able to magnificently, and I will literally grab the book because I was reading through your author's notes where you pulled
I pulled up your Instagram or your Pinterest.
Yes, you
Yeah.
not only had historical accuracy of people that were actually there physically in place, so it was like so accurate. You also had like this supernatural like fantasy part to it, and you just like somehow they like
Combined
worked
them so well.
Thank you. Yeah.
out. Like, I have just, let's let Anna take it away, girl. Take it away. I'm gonna grab the book. I'll be right back. Anna, keep asking.
Oh, that's our question. You just combined these worlds so well that there was never a point that like I was asking myself, was this possible? Could this have really happened? Like, I never doubted the whole time.
Oh, thank you. Well, I think it's because it's a specific period in history. I wanted to create my supernatural element from something that was very much part of that society. And I think that helps the blend, because when I think about the big bad in the Dark Days Club, what I did was I thought, well, what's that society doing at the moment? And what that was in the Regency, which I'm totally obsessed by. So as you may have noticed,
So am I. Yes, girl. Yes.
But that was this odd little period in history where a very rowdy, rambunctious, bawdy Georgian era suddenly became and morphed into an era that was with an emphasis on civility, right? But of course, all those people who were coming through had this rambunctious, rowdy sort of world in them, but they had veneered on top this civility. And of course, this is like the metaphor for humanity always. There is this veneer of civility, and underneath is this seething, yearning desire. And that's how I built my big bad, my supernatural element, because they are manifestations of that yearning and desire and the impulses, not necessarily always bad impulses, but the impulses of humanity. And I think that's why they kind of meld into that society, because they are really part of that society, although of course they're not, but you know, they're the big bad, but because they are built from that foundation, they seem to be a very, it seems to be a very kind of seamless, well, you know, hopefully seamless.
Even
Kind of
the
meld.
way that you call, like you had them calling it alchemy, not magic, because they're
Yeah.
like, oh, magic never. We would never mess with magic. But alchemy, like in some cases, it's okay. Like that was just so incredible.
Yeah. I had to think about how would my early 19th century characters, people, think about these things, with an overlay of the fact that it was a very well, outwardly religious society, and that was the Church of England was the country's religion, and so they were seeing it through the prism of what they had learned through that, and through that prism, and so they would be using language that was acceptable, because to say something was magic, no, you know, that wouldn't have been acceptable. But to say, oh, this is an alchemical kind of thing, yeah, that it lends it kind of has a credence to it, and you know, it's that kind of imagining what your characters, what are the big things in your characters' lives that are going to influence the way that they think.
Yes. Also, really quick, if you're listening to this and you're like, what is this book about? We literally spent an hour and a half recapping the first book, like the episode previous. So if you want to know what this series is about, go listen to that. We like obsess over it. We read the whole thing. We just want to cut to the good stuff. But like, let's talk about Helen for a second. Lady Helen, one of the things that just was so amazing about her character is that she remained likable even in the beginning, which I think is very hard for a character when they're trying to go through, you know, every character has to have an internal and external conflict, you know, and like obviously she had some very intensive external conflicts, but she has a lot of internal conflicts too. And I just thought they were really incredible. First off, the symbolism of how each male character like represented like the oppression of society, from like her brother to her uncle. But I just really love that Helen remained really likable and really like you rooted for her the whole time, even when she wasn't making, like, she had a lot of decisions that she had to make. Holy crap. And you stuck with her. And how did you create? I think that's something that is so unique. I don't get to read a lot of characters where I'm just like, I love you and I'm fighting for you. Like, how did you really come up with her like that?
Yeah, thank you. You know, creating a likable character, I mean, you know, it's not always necessary. There are books that don't have likable protagonists, but I am definitely a writer who likes to have my main character to be, and it may seem a little old-fashioned, but then the book's based in an old-fashioned type, but she's the moral center. So her decision-making is of course going to be impacted by her status as a woman in this society, which, although she's very privileged, is still very oppressed.
Like, girl.
Yeah. So although she's got this kind of beautiful world around her, her freedoms are very managed, and I think that resonates with all women. You know, there are certain things that, you know, that our society is a patriarchal society, and although we're seeing such major moves at the moment, there's still a lot of work to do, you know, and so I think that feeds into it, that she is experiencing what obviously wasn't the beginning, but a continuation of that female journey. So she's back in the 1800s, but there I can bring that oppression out very boldly, because it was bold. I mean, there was newspaper articles about how women were less intelligent than men, and therefore, you know, blah 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 blah. There was, and it was just so bold and so obnoxious.
Yes, the way her uncle and brother were constantly like, well, you are a woman. You are like in the throes of having a fit of emotion more often than not. Like, how can we possibly trust you with this? And I'm like, and Lady Helen stays a lady throughout all of it. She never loses her cool with them. She like just like redirects, and she's like, well, perhaps think of it this way. Like, and it's just like
That's something that like I was telling Anna. She was like, in a lot of books, you'll see there is a very like it's kind of a trope where like a girl goes from like perfect society, and then when she joins the other society, she completely adopts that society's rules and life. But what's crazy is like Helen literally ballet dances perfectly between having to literally dress up like a man and like cut her hair, but then like like, you know, being almost duchess, you know what I mean? Like having to like be a lady and like appear and do all of these things perfectly. And I just think that like Anna's like, when is so she just gonna, and I was like, no, she is Lady Helen throughout. She is Lady Helen.
I was waiting. I was like, when is she gonna throw her first punch at her uncle? When is it coming? But it's like I didn't like it resolved beautifully. I didn't need it to happen, but it just was still.
Yeah, you know, it's part of the journey of Helen is to realize that she's internalized the oppression, that she actually can't. It's very hard for her to say, well, yes, I can do these things. There's nothing really stopping me apart from society conventions. And we have these society conventions internalized, so that when we think, can I do this? Oh, and then we make it into something else. We think, oh, I don't really want to do that. But it's this internalization of what women are capable of, and she has to relearn what she can actually do, and step outside the boundaries that she's actually placed on herself through the oppression of society. So that's part of her journey as well. So she is very much herself, but I think she's a very thoughtful character in this, in that she thinks things through. She is very rational, and the men around her can't see that.
So funny. They're all just like getting, and she's just sitting there like, okay, all of you are dumb, but okay. Yep, I'm a lady. Okay.
Yeah.
Also, like Anna, you gotta ask that question that you have. Go.
Oh yeah. Well, even just like going along with Helen, like she often has to put herself in situations where she's choosing to look like a bit out of the society's norms for the time period. And so like it must have just been fun to come up with these little scenarios where she would have to like and so she wouldn't look scandalized doing things, but like she would have to meet with Lord Carlston, who is the love interest in this book. But like at the same time she would have to do it under like the propriety of the time.
Like she didn't dress like a man to hang out with the guy that she was attracted to. Like things that, like society, like if she was ever found, like literally, like she would die.
Oh well, even just in the very first book, like the beginning pages, like she has this miniature of her mother, and Carlston, when you very first meet him, takes it from her, and she's like, "Oh, I don't think so." And she's like, "Oh, Lord Carlston, like I would love if you would call upon us tomorrow." And her aunt's like, "Why would you do that?" But she's thinking through it. She's like making these plans.
What was scenarios for you? Like,
it is about a lot of my work as the writer was to think a woman in this situation wouldn't do this, so how can I get her to do this, and keep that agency as the protagonist, but within the very strict confines. So she's absolutely right. She edges slightly out of acceptable behaviors. Nothing that will ruin her, but just to get what she wants. So when she does say to Lord Carlston, I do hope you'll call on us, that was very bold. But he can't, because of the pressures on him, he can't actually say no. So to actually have been invited, he can't actually say, well, no thanks, absolutely not. She's cornered him, he cornered her, and then she cornered him, using the propriety of the day, and that of course piques his interest, because suddenly this young woman who, you know, he's very easily taken this thing from her, has come back at him in a very clever way. And that's what, throughout the whole 3 books, I had to go, okay, I want Helen to do this. How can she possibly do this within still remaining a lady? And that was just enormous fun and enormous headaches.
You should go further. Okay, after this, we're calling it on spoilers. Now we have to like let Allison tell us everything. So about spoilers, because I have a specific question. Please tell us, like what those situations were where you were like, this is gonna be great, or like this is gonna be hard. Go ahead.
So you broke up. I'm so sorry, you broke up. What was the question?
What was it like doing those
Your favorite scene where you had to figure out like a good example of when they went to the body house and she was just as a man and they had to go to the back rooms and the lady of the house was like, well, prove that you really like that. And I was reading like, prove it, Carlson, prove it.
That was so much fun to write. That was one of those kind of scenes that I had in my mind quite early. But it was also majorly to get 2 characters to have that moment. I'm trying not to be too spoilery, but to have that
spoiler ban. You can
okay.
If you are not looking for spoilers, you shall not pass. Like, go ahead. Go.
To have a young woman, unmarried woman, kiss a man it's very hard to manage, really, because they were constantly chaperoned, and of course there were opportunities and that kind of stuff. But Lady Helen was not going to be jumping on top of. Well, she does at some point, but you know, but you know, she wasn't actually actively going for the snog, as we say, but that was so to get that situation. I thought, yeah, that this is where the propriety falls away, because it is a place where there is no propriety. You know, this is a bawdy house. Anything goes. You know, you know, and if you think about it in terms of the emotional impact of the book, and that's a very important moment. But then, of course, you know what happens straight after that. And so you think of it as a high, and then we go really into a low. So that was important as well. So that kind of shape of the way it was done. But you know, there's so many scenes I really enjoyed. Enjoyed writing.
Really, did you have a favorite?
We can just sit here and you can just tell us what was going through your mind when you were writing something. We are here to just sit and enjoy. Go ahead, tell us everything.
Oh, some of the other scenes. I loved the wedding, the Derby wedding. Loved writing.
So tender.
Yeah, I love that. I loved writing Carlston's descent into madness.
Talk to us about that.
Well, you know, it's you know, we're looking at 3 books here, and that's 3 very large books, really. When I think about the word count of each book, I'm thinking, my goodness me, what was I thinking? They're kind of got a lot of meat to them.
Yes.
Yeah. But the second book is where I think a lot of trilogies can have a problem, where it can slacken off. It can become a little bit samey. But so I set out to think, well, what do I do in the second book to create high tension? And I decided that we had enough of a relationship with Carlston in the first book to actually be quite traumatized by his me too, by his descent into this supernatural induced madness. And so, you know, it's the development of the Helen and Carlston relationship. She's looking at what could potentially happen to herself, and also we bring in one of my favorite kind of baddies, which is Pike. You know, I mean, and he's such a worm. Oh.
I know. Very like curt, straightforward. You like first meet him, and I'm like, this man is so dislikable.
Yeah.
Or like, immediately like,
Yeah, and I think that his storyline is one of the most interesting to write because of what happens to him.
Yeah.
And I always think of because he's the bureaucrat, and bureaucrats survive.
Mm-hmm.
yes.
Yeah, and it's kind of like he's this kind of little rodent that kind of survives all the blasts going around, that kind of stuff. And in the end, I think that he is one of my most interesting characters to have written. Although I mean, Helen, of course, is my favorite character to have actually written. But Darby as well. I love the sock throwing scene. I loved writing that when they were first finding out about her powers. That was fun. I could just see that on in a film. It's like, oh yeah, that's fun. So that kind of each book has got its major set pieces. So when you're writing fantasy novels, you have these big set piece scenes that have to come along, and they can be challenging but fun to write. But it's those more intimate scenes where I think you kind of very delicately pulling out the emotional lives of these characters that can be just as satisfying.
Yeah. You are so incredibly good at that, because Helen and Carlson's love for each other feels so forbidden and star-crossed, but then you'd sprinkle in these little moments where he would take her jacket off and they were going to train, and his like fingers brushed against the nape of her neck, and they like both felt it, and they like make eye contact, and it's like you can feel the tension so palpably.
Thank you. Yeah, that's quite hard to write. To actually write sexual tension, which of course we all love to read, and not do it in a well-used way, because there's, it is quite difficult. And again, it comes about what are the rules of the day and how can you transgress them. But of course, I really enjoyed that moment with the nape of the neck, because of course it has another meaning as well, and that plays out within that scene. And that I was kind of going as I was writing that.
You're like dangling the carrot in front of the readers, like, oh, here you go. Actually, never mind.
Too bad. Yeah.
Anna and I are both just like, by the way, at the end of this, we like need you to give us like a mini epilogue of like what you imagine.
I need more. I need more.
Finish it, and she's like, okay, it's like just like we just were like, so what would they be doing right now? Like, would they have kids? Like, would they be in Russia somewhere? Like, what like we want to like hear it out. Like,
I also have a huge question. So at the end of the first book, again, this is spoiler territory, Helen is attacked and Carlson saves her, and it's like a lot more than that, but that's the gist of it. And her uncle comes in and sees her on top of Carlson after she saved his life, and he's like, "You're disgusting, what did you do?" But I'm like, did he not see the dead body in the room? Like
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, I think that that's there is a lot of history that's only hinted at between.
Wow, we'd love to hear more. Like, I have no idea how you research so thoroughly, but we'd love to hear that background. This is so fascinating to us.
He took her in under duress. Really, he took her in under duress, and I feel like there's at least bullying, but more probably possibly a totally unpleasant man. I think I'm struggling to answer this because I haven't read the first book for quite a while. And I'm thinking, there was
Anna
a
was
reason.
giving to me 'cause I read this book like 3 or 4 years ago, and I was like, I love this series. And then like she was like, can you believe that this person? Like, what?
There was a very good reason, I think, for him not commenting on that, and I it's completely. I'll have to go and have a look at it and see.
I figured he was probably just so scandalized by seeing like Helen on top of Carlston that he was like I never wanted you here in the first place. Leave.
Yeah, and it was his chance to get rid of her. But I think there's something else as well, and it's kind of playing at the corners of my mind. But let me get back to you on that. If we do another session about craft,
We literally reread your entire, or we like read the entire scene on our podcast.
I know.
Who knows? I mean, feel free to like send us a picture or something. We will just like fangirl over. We'll be like, oh my gosh, this like literally was a page that she wrote from her brain. Like we'll scream.
You know, it's really. I mean, the Dark Days Club was published quite a while ago, and it's really is odd because I experienced writing it, obviously, and editing it and doing all that kind of stuff. And then you move on to the next book, and that becomes the focus. And then you move on to the next book, and that becomes the focus. So while I was writing the trilogy, I had that entire world in my brain. I mean, I had many notes and I had scene boards and all that kind of stuff. But really, that kind of through line was very, very strong in me. And then when it gets published, it's not there anymore. Because necessarily you move on to the next world. And so I do apologize. I'll have a look and search my mind, but it's not quite at the tip of my mind at the moment. But yeah, I'll have an answer for you.
Like, I'd love to know what books I can stock of yours later. Like, obviously, you have Eon and Iona.
Yeah. There's Singing the Dog Star Blues, which is the first book, which is set in the near future about a young woman who is studying time travel, and she gets partnered with the first alien to study on Earth, who happens to be it's a paired race. So they work in pairs, but he has lost his pair, so he is mourning the loss of his pair, his twin, and obviously tries to make Joss his pair, which it's a comedy, by the way, too. Yeah. It's a funny book. I also have written, and this has got massive warnings around it, because it is a very, very, very adult noir crime with a science fiction aspect to it. And I'm talking very adult. And when I read back to it, I go, really? My mum read this?
You're like Lady Helen, where they're like, you like every like hand brush. They're like, oh my gosh. And then you're like, adults. Hey, mom, don't read this one. Thanks.
Yeah, actually, it's my mum's favorite book. I don't know.
Oh my gosh, I love
Mama. I'm kidding.
But yeah, it's quite it's when I think of it, I don't seem to be selling it very well here, but as a read, but it's a very brutal book. So yeah, if you're used to my YA and the high manners of Lady Helen, and even in some regards Eon and Iona, that would be coming quite a shock. And really, it's a very, very, very adult read. Did you know that there was a short story from Lord Carlston's point of view?
I'm calling Reddit to 5 stars on Goodreads. Very excited.
Yes, I was literally just about to bring that up because it's called like a Lord Carlston story, Lessus Nature, or however you pronounce that.
It was a delight.
From his perspective when he first meets Helen.
Yes. Lucis Naturae, yeah. I had a lot of fun writing that as well. It was quite freeing to be in his brain, his kind of point of view as well. And I think it also fills in a few kind of engagement. I mean, when you're reading the 3 books, I think the reader has to work work to a certain degree to actually build this world in their mind. That's how I write, is actually, to engage the reader. You are building this in concert with me as the author. But in the Lucis Naturae, I kind of did a lot of background for Carlston, and we had a little bit of fun with Beau Brummel, who's a real historical character, and that kind of thing. So yeah, it was enormous fun to write.
I love that. Okay, we want to move into our spoiler section, where we literally just ask you questions about all the things, and you just tell us things.
Sure.
First off, I am dying to know how much the Queen knew, because this is something that you would know, but we wouldn't know. How did the Queen actually know about the Dark Days Club? I mean, I know that you talked about it in the third book a little bit, but what did the Queen if you could just give us some insight into the Queen?
Yeah.
To us. Yes.
I think that the Queen is the mistress of not quite knowing everything because she doesn't want to. So she knows enough, and she is a little bit appalled because actually Queen Charlotte was a very religious woman. So she's slightly appalled by the supernatural element within her country. But she understands the necessity of the Dark Days Club. So she knows about them, but she's not delving too heavily into the day-to-day activities of the world. So that's where I placed Queen Charlotte in that kind of slightly blinkered, but if I need to, I will look directly, but not liking it.
Okay, so I also have to ask Delia, so Delia ends up dying in the third book, and I mourned her. I love Delia, and then you find out the truth that Delia was a deceiver. So how did you come to the conclusion to from the beginning make Delia a deceiver? How?
When did you decide that she was a deceiver? How did you plan that whole thing out? We'd love to just know the whole arc and how you wrote that.
Yeah. Look, Delia is present in the first chapter as a scandal, and actually that is the point where Delia is killed. So she is taken over at that point. So hers is a very sad story, and so the Delia that we meet
isn't even real Delia.
No. So that I mean that's for me, that when that was happening, I was kind of that's really sad. I think that's really sad that this and that she is such a good deceiver. That, she gathers this kind of momentum with her, and then when she does, so she doesn't. So the body of Delia is left, and it goes elsewhere. Should we say?
And that reveal in and of itself, I was like, what is happening to all the people around Helen?
Losing her mind. She's texting me Delia's dead.
Yeah. I mean, I missed that.
Celine, I think because you have the background noises on, when your voice gets above a certain octave, it cuts you off.
Texted me Carlson has a son. Helen's married. Helen's getting married.
I know. I can't believe that she went through with the wedding. She really married him.
I have recorded. Don't worry, Allison. I recorded all Anna multiple times would send me we would FaceTime, and she would just I would just record her reactions. I'll send them to you. Reactions were they were money. They were so funny.
Well, it's it's about subverting expectations. I mean, when I set out, I'm thinking she can't marry him.
Yeah.
And then I thought, yes, she can. She must. Not only can, she must.
Yeah.
And so
I'm not about that.
Yeah. And so when I was writing the second and third book, usually I plot quite tightly for the first book, and then from that grows organically the second and third book. But there's always major plot points that have to be met for that whole arc to work. So in between, I get to subvert and to surprise and to do reversals and things like that, which is just the great fun of it. Making sure that, of course, it's A, consistent, and B, makes sense. So that was one of those decisions where I was going, I'm going to have to pull her out, and they're not going to get married. And as I was writing, I'm thinking, yeah, well, what if it went through, and of course that brought out I knew where I was going for the ending, and in a sense I knew that there had to be this big standoff, but I hadn't quite worked out how big and what was going. And then as soon as I said, actually she can, it just went, yeah,
that's how.
Oh
yeah. And I found that writing that wedding to be, it was incredibly difficult, because I didn't want to be doing that. But anyway, yeah, and also there was this draw to another side of the world, and so I was, it was an exciting decision when it came along.
I really love the way that you foiled Darcy and Quinn's wedding with their wedding, like with Duke and Helen's wedding, and like the way that you placed them both, like, and they were so close to each other's too, you know what I mean? And you just have this like what she could have and what she's forced to have, and like the way that you like society's approval versus like, and I just thought that was such a beautiful like analogy. It was so good. But I totally got you off track when you were talking to, like, can we really quick, I totally interrupted when you were talking about Delia and moving the body. So what were you saying? I'm so sorry.
Oh yeah, well I was just saying that no, I'm not too sure. Sorry, I've lost it.
You're just a really clever person with the Delia thing. We were just sitting there like, oh my God.
Because her body was still there, but the deceiver in her had moved.
Yes.
Yeah,
else. And so that body that had been maintained by that deceiver was shed, and so she'd been dead for a long time. So in that sense, and then it moved. And I just think that in terms of the wedding of Darby and Quinn, it was such a beautiful wedding. I mean, I looked at the common prayer book of that time. It's slightly different, but I was kind of like, when Helen is saying "I will," she's actually marrying Carlston at that point.
Oh, I know, because it's a running theme throughout the rest of the book.
Yeah. And do you know where I got that from? I mean, this is such a kind of like, so many influences on you when you're writing. I was hugely obsessed as a teenager with West Side Story. And at that moment when they marry in the dress shop.
Yeah.
It's a pretend marriage, but it's their real marriage. And it's kind of like that whole Romeo and Juliet, where you have this kind of what would you call it, a run through marriage, but so actually, that's where I felt like they
that. Like, honestly, Allison, thank you. Like, thank you. Like, all there and just be like, so explain the symbolism behind this. Like, can you just like love that.
Yes.
Your thoughts, Anna. Anna's so happy.
I know, I am. I'm like, I just love this story. And so, okay, what I need to know is I'm like, I love Helen and Carlston so much. And I'm like, do they go to Moscow? Are they like,
what do they do? Tell us.
Well, as you know, I have left it slightly open.
I know, I'm like,
yeah.
There's more coming.
I'm fine with the novella. I will personally buy 100 copies if that's what's necessary.
Yeah, I do like to leave that kind of opening, because I mean, the reader travels with these characters for 3 books, and they're, you know, and a very kind of intense ride. So that if I close it off too much at the end, I think that I'd like to think that the reader will say, oh, I think they go to Moscow, or, you know, I think that this happens, and and this kind of stuff, so that you can create your own world after that. That's great, because I've moved off there. It's now your world that you're creating in your head. Now, personally, I was because I went to, everything kind of feeds into your world. I actually went to Russia to publicize Lady Helen books and the Eon and Iona books, because they bought them. And I had such an interesting time there. And that's what influenced, because I knew that at that time in the 1812s, so many things were happening within Russia. So that's where I put them. And, that's where I think they do go. But there might have been a little side trip.
A little vacay?
No, well, not quite a vacay, a kind of a little spy trip, I think, in my head, maybe to Paris.
Oh my God, I love that.
They kind of went that way, and that would have been very, very dangerous, because of course it was during the Napoleonic Wars.
Are they married now? I mean, they technically, like you said, they're married in your head, right?
Oh, in my head they are. You're
well, I'm just wondering whether, because Helen would have to have a year of mourning.
Yeah, she would.
So she gets to be the merry widow for a year.
Merry widow duchess, might I say. Like, not a bad tile to land on. She's like, whoops, I have a bunch of money now, and also...
Absolutely, we win-win.
Way to write that for her. Like, good work. Like, maybe she could get married, and then she'll be loaded. This is great.
Yeah.
Or very rich widow.
Very rich, yeah, and with a title, and so yeah.
And she has like a super hunky man just chilling with.
Like, no one's asking her questions. She's gonna leave the country. No one's gonna be like worried about her propriety. So I'm like,
married now. So I mean, she never made a wedding night with him, but it's still married now. What?
I'll let your imagination go wild there.
We'll fill in the blanks. We'll know what happened in Paris.
Yeah. You put that starting point in the boarding house there.
Adult book. We'll just be like, and then Lord Carlson and Lady Helen. That very adult extra book that's following. I love that. Okay, go Anna.
I don't know if I have any more questions. I feel so my cup is full. Thank you so much for coming on and answering all of our questions.
One last question I have. One last one. When do you think Carlston first fell in love with Helen? Like, when was it for him? When was that moment for him?
When he first fell in love.
That's a great question.
I think that when he was in the giving back the miniature, I think that he was still under the impression that he was just interested in her as a reclaimer.
You can always get back to us if needed.
Yeah, I think he's such a slow burn. He's such a slow burn, and I don't think he's entirely in touch with his emotions the whole time. Because he was fighting against it.
You want to think about it, and then you can just send me like a little recorded thing on Instagram. I will let you I can add it in later.
Recording of this exact moment. That would be great.
Yeah, look, I think he was ignoring his emotions because he still thought of himself as married.
Yeah.
And so I think that the real moment where he allows himself to hope is at the end of book 2. Yeah.
When he calls her amore me, or however it's said, I was like, oh, my heart.
That was the moment for him when he's like, I literally love you. Like, you're the love of my life. Like, that was.
Yeah. And then at the end of book 2, where he says, this is it. And she she actually turns it on its head and says, "This nothing's changed," and that, that that guts him, I think.
Oh, Carlson, I love that man. Stupid wife has been ruining my life forever. Like, I'm gonna go to France for a little bit, go take care of some crazy chick that just be right back.
I know. It was so interesting bringing back the specter of his wife. It was,
Amazing.
Again, it's about what stops those two people from getting together.
Right, as Helen is ready to walk away from everything, he receives life-changing news, and he's like, I have to go find out if this is real. He's like, okay, like, I understand, like, it kills me, but I understand.
And you could understand it. You couldn't stand in the way of that, Yes.
Variety and stuff. Okay, thank you so much for coming on, Allison. I literally love you, and you're amazing. I'm about to go draw I'm gonna like go send you some personalized books mail, like book stickers. So I love you. You're great. Is that weird? Like,
Wait.
How many pages that you've written at this point? I'm about to go check out Ian and Yo from the library just so I can read more.
Thank you.
We want you to come back on to talk about writing, but we'll do that in like a month or two from now. But I just wanted to say huge thank you. We are such huge fans of you, and thanks for giving us like those little nuggets that we just
thank you.
We're gonna hold forever in our hearts.
And I will have a look at that last bit in the thing and think, what was I thinking? What's the through line there? Because I keep notes and that kind of stuff. So I'll look that up for you. But
awesome.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. As you know, I would be very pleased to come back and talk all things craft. And it's been great.
Oh my gosh. Thank you, Allison.
Thank you so much. We'll talk to you again later then.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.